session that we gave, Carlos Amela gave a session on tips on how to land your first job. Now, if you did that one, you'll gave a session on tips on how to land your first job. Now, if you did that one, you'll recall that tip number 3 was about polishing your online presence, and that was referring to LinkedIn. And that's exactly what we're going to do today together. Now, my mission is that you walk away from this session knowing clearly what steps to take to improve your profile. But also, I would like you to learn about some of the ways to do searches and how to best to engage with your network. So before we begin, I'd just like to remind you, you can mute your microphones. You won't be needing your webcams either. And of course, we'd love to know the home country that you come from. So after your full name, if you can go to participants and rename it, putting the home country afterwards, that would be great. And if you have questions, please do share them in a separate chat with Karen, who's here with us from admissions. Hi, Karen. And we will field those at the end of the session, right? And then of course, if you have any IT issues, you can send a separate chat to our MBA admissions team. And just finally, as a reminder, we will be recording this session, and so we will be sharing it with you afterwards. Okay, a few words about myself. If you're curious about my background, I'm an associate director here at IESE. I've been working here for over 13 years, and my focus is in career management and counseling. Specifically, I work with the executive MBA students, but I also give sessions like this one to our MIM students. And of course, you'll recognize this slide from Carlos. I'm part of a larger team, the Career Development Center, and we are all here to support our master's degree program students and our alumni community when it comes to careers. And one of the things I love about working with this team is that it's very diverse, very international. And last time I counted, I think we had people coming from 15 different countries. So Carlos is from Nicaragua, we have Singapore, we have the Philippines, we have Lebanon, we have people from Brazil. So it's a really fun team to be a part of. And you know, one of my passions, since I've been in this role for so long, is following careers of our alumni. So people who've gone through a career change specifically. So understanding their motivations and how they made it happen. Now, I know that Carlos talked a lot about our spirit of service, and IESE is definitely one of those places with the human touch. I wanted to add just a few notes about my background on the personal side, so as we get to know each other. So I am from Chicago, which is where I was born and raised. My family is from Greece. And I won't detail my professional background because you can find all of that information on LinkedIn. I will say that after working here for 6 years, I studied in a program called the Program for Leadership Development. So I am part of the larger global alumni community that IESE has. And just like Carlos, I did not have a clear idea of what I wanted to do in my early career. But I did have one thing clear, which is I wanted to do something international. And I definitely have been able to do that over these years, living and working in 6 different countries across 4 regions, which is how I learned some of those languages that I speak now. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Today, we're going to focus on optimizing your profile. So we're going to spend at least half of the time in this part of the agenda today. And then one of the questions that comes up quite frequently is around premium membership. Is it worth it? And definitely LinkedIn is always trying to upsell you their membership, so it must be on your brain, and I can talk a little bit about that. Then what I'd like to do is step into the recruiter's shoes and understand how is it that they look for people? How do they do searches, and how can you be found? And finally, I'll conclude with the part on doing your actual research and exploring. So when you want to go find people and companies and job opportunities, what are some of the ways that you can do that within the platform? So let's take a step back. Let's look at LinkedIn. Now, if I had to describe LinkedIn in one word, I would say that it is a game changer. Why is that? Because it has changed the way people look for jobs and how recruiters find candidates. LinkedIn was founded in 2002, and since then, we now have up to 690 million members worldwide. 70% of those members are outside of the US. But it's not the same depending on the region and the country. So if we look at countries like China, if we look at India, the numbers are actually not that large compared to the population of the country. But then you have a place like Singapore with 2 million members for a country that's maybe close to 6 million. That's huge. So the membership numbers vary, but the tendency, right? It's on the rise. It keeps growing. So now remember what I said about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a game changer. So what was, when I think about what was job searching like before LinkedIn? And I can think back to my own experience when I wanted to learn Spanish way back in 1995. I decided to go live and work in Argentina, of all places. Only there was a slight problem. I did not know a single person there. And so for 6 months, I would ask people around me if they knew anyone. Do you know anybody? Do you know anybody? I even asked my boss, and he pulls out his Rolodex because that's what people used back then. He had it stuffed with business cards. But, the search or the request I had looking for contacts was not very sophisticated. I wasn't asking people about, do you know anybody working in marketing, which was my area of interest back then. It was just, do you know anybody alive, right? So I compiled my list of 20 names. I took my backpack and I went to Argentina. Now that is the short version of the story. Now it did work out. I did end up getting a job because I spoke to people, and those people introduced me to other people that led to those jobs. But when I think about how searches take place today, it's changed radically because LinkedIn empowers you. It empowers you to be able to explore, to do research, to find people and talk to them about areas of work that interest you. Okay, so if that doesn't inspire you, hopefully it does to help you keep working on your optimizing your profile, which is what we're going to dive into right now. So step number 1 is about customizing your Pure Profile's URL. Okay, and so I'm sure some of you have already done this, but some of you have just probably what the default says, which, and here's an example of that. Basically, it takes your name and it adds a bunch of letters and numbers. But why is it important to customize this? Well, it builds credibility. And if you want to be, for example, somebody in digital marketing, companies do look at that. And it makes it easier to find you. It's also a branding opportunity because if you want to put your URL in your CV, having a really long one, it just doesn't look very nice. And you can also add it to your emails. How do you do this? How do you customize it? You just go to the Me icon at the top of your homepage. You click on View Profile, and then you just click Edit Profile on the right side. And this is what it looks like. Okay. And if you want to see a couple of examples, a couple of ideas, here you can see my own, how it actually used to look. I've updated it. You can use your name separated by a dash and the last name. You can use your first initial. You may one day have a company and want to use your company name for your LinkedIn URL, or you have a keyword that you want to use. But this, I think, gets harder with time as more people have already taken those words. So you can do what Sylvia here has done, which is have your name plus the keyword right there. So step 2. So I'm sure probably all of you have that LinkedIn photo already added. Now, LinkedIn is always trying to send you messages about why it's important to complete your profile. And the reason for this is because it's true. It does give you more connection requests and more profile views and more messages. But they keep updating their tools that they have. So putting in a photo and being able to edit it has gotten a lot easier. But what are some top tips you can keep in mind as you add your photo? So definitely using a high resolution image, that's pretty straightforward. Using a headshot as well, and we definitely don't recommend using a cropped photo. And then the other tip that I have is around dressing for the job that you want. So what does this mean? That means if you are interested in working for a startup and you think about the type of clothes people might wear in that and working for that environment, probably wearing a suit and a tie it's not coherent with that environment. And of course, you want to have a genuine smile. Why is this important? People who are finding you, they haven't met you before. This is a first impression that they get, and you want to make them feel that you are approachable. And also, you want to make sure that your background doesn't have things that distract. So, for example, here's a good picture. Here's a good example of a background that could distract. Right? There's a crane going through this one of our students' heads. And there's a couple of other things I see in the photo that, there's a shadow on the face. Looks like he's squinting. He might be glaring from the sun. Now, you can use a free resource to analyze how good your LinkedIn profile picture is. And the free resource I have here is called Snapper. And this is fantastic. Now, I don't know if Enrico used this, but I did look at his profile recently, and I was happy to see he's updated his photo. Now, I have another student who showed me her LinkedIn profile, and I recommended that she change it, she update it. And so she did use Snapper, which was really convenient to compare the different photos that she had. So this is her photo beforehand, and this is afterwards. This is the score that she got, but beyond the score, the service is telling you what's working, what's not working. And it gives you a very detailed report, and it's very good for comparing photos when you're trying to decide which one to use. So step 3, what about the background image? On the top right here, I have basically what the default is, which is this blue image with dots connected to each other, right? It's sort of like this networking message. But if you want to get some ideas, you can see what our career management team has shared with our students. These are sort of background images that you can use. And the great thing about these is, they have the logo of IESE, but they give a certain feeling. So with Nicolaus, you can see what kind of feeling do I get from this background image? Somebody who is strong in teamwork, somebody who's a good communicator. And with Ana Francesca, I see this and I think, probably she has a global mindset, or she's had this international experience. And then with Veronica, I get the sense here that there's collaboration here, there's diversity represented. It has sort of this design thinking feel. And then, but you don't, have to use these. You can come up with your own. And I loved seeing this one from one of our students, because it's something different. It's something different than any other one that I've ever seen before. And it's also coherent with his headline, what he has there. And I think he says something like creative mind or creative thinker. Now there's other background images you can have. Some people have them represent their city or the sector that they're interested in. I have a few more examples just to keep the juices flowing here. If you end up working in a large company and you are in a sales or business development role or in a communication role, you have external stakeholders, it's great to have the company background image. This is one of my favorites. This is a person who, put this one. In fact, I get the feeling that it might even be her. I can't see the face with this space outfit on. And lo and behold, she works for Airbus Defense and Space. And then here's an image. This is somebody who's an entrepreneur. He has a company called Galacta, and he's taken the images that he uses on his website. And then finally here I have someone who's a marketer, and she's decided to use a quote that resonates with her. And so that's in sync with her, with her as a marketer. So these are just a few other ideas that you can have for your background image. Now, there's a resource here that I'd like to share with you. You can look at this on your own time for customizing these banners, and they both come from Canva. Now, step 4, how to write an effective headline. Okay, this is the banner, or this is the piece that's right underneath your name. It's also the piece that gets viewed the most. So this is, they sometimes say this is the most important real estate in LinkedIn. And here you can have, this is the let's say, template that we recommend for our students. And here you can put the industry that you focus on, your function. If you're focusing on a certain region, you can even put a qualification or something about your personality. Here, I have an example. I did a search on digital transformation in the essay, and this is what came up. The default, if you don't edit your headline, is it puts what your current role is, whether you're a student or working at a company. And that was the case here for Laura Ferrer, where she has strategy and digital transformation manager at Capgemini. You'll also see some people have used this sort of, headline with the lines in between. Another type of headline is what we would call the value proposition. And in this case, this is somebody who's saying what she does to help her particular stakeholder and how she does it. Helping manufacturing customers to maximize their ROI in Autodesk solutions. This might be something that you want to consider later on when you get your first job after the program. Let's see. And then, of course, just some tips here. This is an opportunity to optimize keywords. There are lots of places in LinkedIn where you can put keywords. The top 3, I believe, are your summary, your work experience, but the one that's most heavily weighted for the search algorithm is the headline. And here again, you can use up to 120 characters. I would shy away from making it too long. I think once you get beyond 7 or 8 specific items, that might be just too much. And also, you don't want to put things that are too general. So if somebody puts in leadership, that's really not very specific. Okay, so those are some tips there for how to write an effective headline. And that brings us to step number 5, which is how to draft a compelling summary. This is in what is called the About section. Now, here, you can write your elevator pitch. Okay, so I've seen there is a limit on the words that you can have, up to, let's say, 2,000 characters. But I've seen many different styles here, and I've seen as little as, let's say, 3 sentences, but I've seen as much as, let's say, 3 paragraphs. Here again is another place where you can add keywords and some rich media, some photos or videos. But what do you want to focus on here? You can focus on your career accomplishments and aspirations. Now, some people like to have examples. So I wanted to give you this one example. It's one template that some people use, which is basically kind of like a formula. You talk a little bit about your past. What skills and experience have you had up until now? Where are you growing today? What are you currently doing? As this person says, they're currently pursuing a full-time MBA, or something about the future. What is your aspiration? Okay. And for more examples, this is a great link from LinkedIn that highlights, a little bit US centric for my taste, but it highlights 10 examples of LinkedIn profile summaries and why they are strong. And then if you scroll down on that page, you'll find more tips about how to put your summary together. So as we move on to step number 6, here we have, what about your work experience, right? You have to detail that to some level. The questions here are around, what do I write? What do I include? And definitely, you know, there are some things to take into consideration. If you've worked for a company that is not well known, then this would definitely be a time to describe the scope of the company. Again, you can add your keywords and any rich media, but here you want to focus on achievement statements, is what we recommend. And then the question of how much detail, I'll tell you what I've seen and I'll tell you what I recommend. And of course, you have both extremes. You have what I call the minimalist approach, which is no detail. It's just the name of the employer, the job title, and the dates that you've worked in a certain location. And then you have the other extreme, which is copying and pasting a CV or a resume. And I don't recommend this because as you edit your CV or you tailor it for different applications, you don't want to have to go back and you know, edit your LinkedIn profile. So I believe in a happy medium. You know, you can include you know, basically I would stick to at least 1 or 2 bullet points under each work experience that you have as kind of a rule of thumb. But you can also, you know, edit freely here. Now, step number 7 goes to, you know, what about skill and endorsements and recommendations? They're very different in the sense that one has to be a written endorsement. Somebody has to actually write it for you. And the other one are skills that you've sort of uploaded into the platform and that people go and endorse them for you. It's a really easy way for your contacts to quickly endorse you, and you can edit and delete them and change the order. It's true you can have up to 50 skills, but that's really, you don't need to put 50 skills. As a rule of thumb, I would say anywhere from up to 10 to 15 is plenty. And even if you just start with 5, the key thing is that you can prioritize your top 3. So these can be edited in terms of the order that people see in your profile. And then with the recommendations, you can request one from within the platform. You can also proactively recommend people in your network. But if I think from the recruiter's point of view, what do they value more? Well, what do you think? Okay. Recommendations appear in LinkedIn's recruiter view, which tells me they do value more recommendations. Okay, so a few more tips on recommendations. Here you want to go for quality versus quantity. It's not that you have to have so many, but the ones that you have, you know, you need them to be really good. And then who recommends you matters. It's fine, you can ask a recommendation from a teammate, but it is going to be seen with more weight if you get a recommendation from somebody who's been your boss or somebody you've been reporting to or somebody that's been your client. And again, keywords here matter. And one thing you can do is when you do the request is you can kind of point people a little bit in the direction. You can give them some pointers on what it is, what area you want them to focus on, because that does help them write the type of recommendation that you would like to receive. So step 8, what about these other sections? I'm sure you've filled out a lot of this already, but just to kind of go through them, you have your education, license and certifications. Under accomplishments, it kind of bundles a whole bunch of categories, which is really great. And then I just wanted to highlight here under interests, it's very interesting, and I will show you in a little bit, but here you can also see, it's not only about adding the people that you follow or the companies that you follow, and joining certain groups in your areas of interest or the alumni of the schools that you've joined. But this is a place where you can also see what the interests of other people are, which is very interesting when you're doing research. So what is the best way to engage with my network? Well, if you ask LinkedIn, it's pretty clear. They think it's by posting or writing an article. This is taken from the homepage. It's at the very top, so it's the first thing that you see. They want to encourage engagement in this way. And this is something you can do. People post on many different categories. They send announcements, they update events, maybe they've been a part of, or maybe they've had somebody participate in a class and they want to talk about it. Maybe they're sharing a piece of news, they're just forwarding something, or they can write their own article, substantive article. But there are some tips around this, which is apparently timing matters. Because if you post something or write something over the weekend, there's going to be fewer people that see it. Or if you post it on a Friday or Monday, the recommendation is stick to Tuesday, Thursday, and HubSpot even details to the extent of when is the best time of day to do so on those days. And of course, remember to add your hashtags so your posts or articles are easy to find. And here are a few more resources that you can look at on your own time. So if you want to share news or organize the news feeds that you have, you can do that through Feedly. And then Zapier has a whole bunch of social media management tools that you can look at if you're becoming an expert in this area. Now, one of the questions I frequently get from students is, well, what's the difference between a LinkedIn profile and a CV? And a LinkedIn profile, if we think about it, everybody has one, whether they're looking for a job or not. That's not the same thing as a CV. A CV kind of shouts, I'm looking for a job. And it's a required part of the process for now. But LinkedIn, you don't know. And the other, I would say, major difference is that with LinkedIn, you can only have one profile, at least in one language. Whereas a CV, you can tailor it to the different job positions. And of course, the advantages of LinkedIn is that it has far more detail than a CV because you can list all this additional information around your interests, around groups that you're a member of. You can get these recommendations and endorsements. And also, it allows you to interact with people, right? You can even message people through the platform, and you can find people, of course. And then, what I would say is the most important tip here to keep in mind, it's important to be consistent between the two, because if there is a recruiter looking at your LinkedIn and they have your CV in the other hand and the dates don't match up, that's a red flag. If you have a title in one place that says something in LinkedIn but it's different on your CV, that's also a red flag. So you want to make sure that those things are consistent between the two. And then some of the top questions I get around settings has to do with, how do I make changes without notifying anyone? You might be working somewhere, editing your profile, adapting it to, let's say, what your future aspiration is and putting emphasis somewhere, and you don't want other people to see that. No problem. You just turn off that feature in the privacy setting. The other question is, how can I view other profiles in private, what I call stealth mode? And that's also found in the same place I'll show you in a second, where you can do that, and you can decide if you want to be viewed or not, because a lot of people do actually leave this information public. Because I'm constantly looking for alumni all the time, I just by default have it on private mode. So before we go into understanding premium membership and whether or not it's worth it, I would like to go into I would like to demo the platform and show you a few key pieces of information so that it can stay fresh in your mind and you know where things are located. Okay, so basically, if this is the home page, but if I click on me and then I click on view my profile, this is where you can edit your public profile and URL. Right? And so it's very easy to do, and you just put that in there. Okay, I've actually added a keyword recently. And then if you look at this add the profile section, okay, I actually haven't noticed it until recently, so I'm thinking it's probably a newer feature, but it's sort of a quick link to all the different sections that you have. Now, there's other things here as well that I haven't mentioned, like volunteer experience, and I'm sure many of you have volunteer experience, so I encourage you definitely to include it in your profile, and that's how you can find it. And then here, of course, we have the about, the summary that I mentioned. So here you can see that this is collapsed. You can only see my first two lines, which tells me the first two lines of your summary are really important to getting somebody's attention. for them to decide, am I going to click on more? Okay, let's say you decide to click more on my profile. I talk a little bit about what I've done in the past. I talk about where I've lived and worked. It's actually, it's quite simple. I've included these personality inventories because I work around self-awareness assessments with students all the time. So I've added mine. And here I've added some advice for connecting. And you may consider doing that as well. I see a lot of students actually just put in their email address there directly. Another way I didn't mention before, you can also, I've seen people start their summaries with a quote, with some sort of quote that resonates with them. So that's another way to do it. This area, the featured area, is relatively new for Rich Media. I've added this video not long ago, the dashboard. Now, is this significant? In my case, my primary goal is to find alumni. I don't actually pay much attention to this part of the platform. I think LinkedIn wants us to because they've tied their premium features to it. What I do want you to focus on here is this activity piece. This activity piece is very interesting when you are looking at profiles. You're deciding, who do I want to reach out to at a company? This can give you a sense of a person. You can see what they've posted. You can see what they like. You can see what they've shared. So it gives you a sense of what they're thinking about. So it's also handy if you're interviewing with somebody that you haven't met before. I'm going to zip through experience here because it's pretty straightforward. And I'm sure you have your education all cleaned up here. And here are some certifications. What I'd like to just show you here in skills and endorsements is what I mentioned before. You can decide which skills are shown before you have to expand. So I've picked counseling, coaching, and communication, but if I wanted to change it, I could do that as easy as just unclicking here, clicking on entrepreneurship as a skill that I would want to highlight. And of course here are the recommendations. Now with the recommendations, since you're early in your careers, a habit that I've only picked up on recently, but I wish I had done years ago, it's not always easy asking people for recommendations, and I know it's not something I enjoy doing, let's say, but I promised myself I'd make the habit of just asking at least one person a year, maybe two, and that way over time you start accumulating a lot of recommendations. So I encourage you to do that and keep that in mind as you go through your own careers. Here's languages. They're in alpha order. Maybe they will change that at some point. And finally, in terms of these different sections, I've mentioned interests before, and this is the piece that's also like activity. You can look at this to see, okay, who the person that I'm interviewing with, who are they following? What are, it's interesting information, but I want to show you groups. Why is groups interesting? They have something, what I call the LinkedIn loophole. What do I mean by that? It's basically a way to send messages to people, even if you're not connected. So if I go to IESE Global Alumni and I want to send a message to somebody, all I have to do is click on the group. I look at the members. I want to see all of them. And I can do a search by name here if I already have the person in mind. But if I want to connect with or send a message to Jean-Baptiste, we're not connected. We don't know each other. Maybe I'm doing research on consulting firms. All I have to do is click message. I don't have to send him an invitation. I don't know him. I don't have to look for his email address. Make it really, really easy. So that's one of the things that I wanted you to be aware of and keep in mind as you find people and you want to reach out to them. And finally, I just want to conclude here with this demo by showing you a few of your settings that I mentioned by clicking on profile and then here under settings and privacy. Okay, so this is the focus here is I'm going to scroll down to how others see you, how others see your LinkedIn activity. So this is the one that I mentioned before, profile viewing options, choose whether you're visible or viewing in private mode, and decide how you want to be viewed. Sharing job changes, I recommend you keeping it in no as a default, and then when you want to make an announcement, you can always change it to yes and then go back to no as you kind of tweak your profile. So that concludes this part of the demo. I'm going to go back to the presentation and continue with understanding premium membership. Hold on. Okay. So what's interesting to keep in mind here with premium? Since I've been a member since 2004, I've seen so many changes, and I definitely noticed that after LinkedIn was acquired by Microsoft in 2016, their monetization strategy has, let's say, been more intense, right? And this is also something that it's a bit confusing because in fact the plans keep changing, but they're changing for the better because they're getting less expensive. They've added these tiers, and one of them is for career, although very recently they just added one for learning as well. And I think what you have to think about is what is your main goal here in all of this. And your main goal is, right, it's searching for a job, and a lot of those features that you need for looking for a job are in fact free. You can focus your search by talking to alumni. You can find alumni for free. You can be found by recruiters for free. You can find jobs for free. You can get a referral, ask for a recommendation, and you can even now prepare for your interviews with some of the, at least for now it's free, right? It might go to premium like Learning did. So that's what I want you to keep in mind around, what's your overriding goal here. But if you're still not sure, you can always try a 1-month trial. But really, what are the benefits? They say it gives you unlimited people browsing, but probably you're not going to reach the limit. The people who reach the limit are recruiters, and those are the people that they want to target because that's where they get a majority of their revenue from. 60% or more of their revenue comes from the recruiters that use their platform and can pay up to, I don't know, something like $10,000 a year to use this powerful platform. But if you're still not sure, I have this litmus test. You can ask yourself, do you use LinkedIn regularly? And have you ever reached the limit of your free account? And if you have, it's going to warn you, but then it also resets every month. So these are a few of the things you can keep in mind when you're deciding whether or not to go premium. And of course, you can always do the 1-month trial just for fun. Okay, so now we're getting into the part about being found. And I really would like you to step into the shoes of the recruiter and think about their day-to-day. I read that on average, recruiters have anywhere from 30 to 40 open positions that they're trying to hire for. That could be more, that could be less. If they had 100 applicants for each of those, let's say 30 positions, and we know that can be more, that's like 3,000 candidates. So it's no surprise that companies have turned to these ATSs, the applicant tracking systems, to manage these huge levels of applications. But how do they search? Okay, and this is what I want to show you on this slide. Well, this is sort of the dashboard that they see. What are their filtering options? Clearly, keywords is one of them, but very easily they will put in a job title, right? They're looking for a project manager, they put in project manager for the title. Location can be important. They even will look for the company where you might be working, or maybe a place where you've studied, right? All these things are filtering options. But what comes up? What do they see? They see the total number of candidates. In this case, it's 1,000, so far more than the 100 I mentioned before. But an interesting thing here is also the company connections. This means that you both are connected to the same person in the recruiter's company. And why this is interesting, I was talking to one of our EMBA students recently about a job that they got. And I'm always asking this question, right? This is my passion. How did they get it? Was it networking? Was it applying online? And he said, well, I applied online, but guess what? The recruiter talked to somebody in their company to find out some information about me. So he inadvertently got basically a referral without trying by the recruiter talking to this connection. Recruiters are busy. They want to save time. So this also goes to how many connections you have actually really matters, right? And that people know you. They also will see, are you engaging with their brand? And how do they see this? This is in the part that I showed you before with interests, where if you're following a company, they will see that. What does that indicate for a recruiter? That indicates your level of motivation, and they also see if you've applied before. But what helps recruiters find you? What brings your, let's say, profile up in the search? And this is, I think, something that LinkedIn has defined very clearly because they want as much engagement as possible, is the level of your profile completeness. This is what they say. And the number of connections that you have, all right? So those two things, plus recommendations, and plus these details that show you're a high performer. What does that mean? That could mean your grade point average. That could mean your test score. It could mean some of the achievements that you've had in a work experience. All of these things help recruiters find you, and those are the things that you want to keep in mind. The other two things that are relatively new on the platform, how can you help recruiters find me? Well, they don't want to there's a lot of maybe passive candidates out there that they're looking at. People may be considering something or not, but recruiters want to invest their time with people that are open to being reached out to. So guess what? LinkedIn has created this feature based on the recruiter's need. So my recommendation here is to have it on yes as a default. Just, why not? Some people are concerned when they're working at a company if their recruiters will actually see it. And LinkedIn has a disclaimer that basically they say no, but if a company has various pages, they have subsidiaries, really small companies that are not all in the same sort of page, they can't make the guarantee. But I don't think it matters. I think you should my recommendation is have it on yes. That's what I would do. And then the second thing that you can do are these job alerts. You let recruiters know that you're interested in a job at their company by creating the job alert. So again, that shows a level of motivation. And when you have hundreds of candidates, many of them qualified, they're going to look at this level of detail to decide who to reach out to or not. And finally, we're going to dive into how best to find people, companies, and jobs. Now, in terms of finding people, there's actually 3 ways you can do it. I've highlighted here for the first one, the one that I would say is the best way to do the search, which is an advanced people search. You can also look for people through the company page and through the university pages. Why is this, let's say, the best one? It has the most number of filters. Now, I've sort of put this together here so you can see the different filters that are searchable. And some of them are obvious, whether it's location, whether it's a company that that you're looking for, the current company that the person works for. People sometimes overlook things like job title, or they overlook, well, if I'm working at Dannon, I want to change jobs. What would be another company, that people go to afterwards? And then here's an example of a search that I did using 2 filters. I basically put current company Google and I put ESA Business School. And these are the results that I get. I get 129 basically alumni working for Google. You can see that Google is one of the companies that I follow. And if you do end up not using the filters but the search bar, we recommend that you use this Boolean search techniques. This is the same way that you're searching when you're in Google. And I won't go into detail here about it, but I have a link for you that you can use as a resource to find out, what's sort of the correct way to do that. And what if I want to search for people at a specific company? You can do that too. Here again, we have Google, and the nice thing about this feature is it's visually friendly. You can filter by school, by function, by location. And here is an example of me doing just that with Google with ESA. And then you can see the different profiles visually. So that's nice if if you're really focused on a particular company. And then how do I use LinkedIn's alumni tool? You go to university pages and you can look at alumni. You can also cut it off by the start year or end year. So you can be very specific. And the search that you do, I've learned this recently within the alumni tool, does not count against your total usage in searches that they're measuring. Okay, so you found some people. Now what? How do you contact them? And I'm not going to go into detail here, but and these are not in a specific order, but there are 5 main ways to reach out, right? You can do the traditional approach, which is sending an email. And for finding emails, I have a hack here that you can consider for finding, let's say, the corporate email address. You can do what I showed you earlier, which is finding a message via the shared group. You can send a message via the shared group that you have with someone. You can request to connect. I don't always recommend that, but I know people do it because it's easy. And so if you're very tempted to do that with alumni from your university, I would definitely recommend adding a personal note on how you found them or what your interest is just to personalize it more. You can send an email, but as we see with premium, you actually don't get very many emails. You only get 3 with premium, so not very valuable. And you can also do it the traditional way of just, asking somebody, getting introduced directly. And here, if you want to find a company, LinkedIn has company pages. This is really useful. If you put in a company name, it will take you to similar pages of other companies. So if you're trying to develop a target list of companies, what you want to do is grow that list. You want to expand it, because the longer the list is, the more possibilities there are for you. The other way to expand that list is through looking at job postings. In a job posting, they will show you similar jobs, and then you can see new companies that maybe you hadn't considered before or even heard of. And then for maybe future consideration, you can go back to looking for companies that people went to after leaving their company, which I think is really interesting way to approach it when you're kind of stumped or don't have a clear sort of vision of what direction you want to go, and you can learn from others. Here's the jobs page, and this is very straightforward. I have a video for you here if you want to look at it on your own time about how to do this, but then you can just, put in the job title that you're looking for and the location. So, but what if you're looking in multiple places? What if you're completely open to anywhere in Europe? And I've heard this before. It's going to be trial and error. You're going to have to test it out. I do recommend narrowing the cities down and picking, let's say, narrowing down to 3 cities at most for starters, and then you can play around with that a little bit. You can set up job alerts. As we know, recruiters like it. It's reactive. I think you have to do more than that, and I'll explain that. But ultimately, you want to find contacts to speak in these companies of interest. And I would recommend limiting your time dedicated to just surfing, because it's infinite, the number of possibilities that we have. So as empowering as LinkedIn can be, the decision-making process there can be daunting. And I would say focus on having a contact strategy. So how to be effective or not to be? Now, we've all been through job searching, and we know that it's an emotional roller coaster. I mean, there's lots of ups and downs. There's lots of rejection. There's lots of not hearing from these busy recruiters. And the tendency that we see over and over again is for students to be at home, look online, and apply to a job. Furiously. Many. I mean, and I've heard it. I've heard students who've applied to more than 100 jobs with very little or no response. And what happens? You're waiting. You're waiting for a response, waiting, and nothing happens. So my question to you again is really think about what's the most effective strategy for job searching. And it really does boil down to people. And it's having a contact strategy. So I'm just going to highlight real quickly ways to engage. Oh, there's so many. But first of all, you have to have a network. You have to have connections. And so how many connections should I have? I don't think that's really the question to ask. I think you want to try to connect all the time with people that you're meeting, people that you've studied with, people that you work with, people that, this is something that you want to build up over time in a intentional way. And the question here is, do I want to go for quality or quantity? I think a lot of you will know the answer here. And LinkedIn, when LinkedIn, I talk to people who work for LinkedIn, they're always going to say quality. There's a few exceptions where quantity, meaning I'm going to accept anybody who invites me no matter what. And that might be if you are trying to be an influencer, or if you have a company or a service that you're providing. So the quantity really, really matters. But definitely go for quality. You can decide if you want to sync up your contacts from your phone. You can do that. The instructions are here in this link. But ways to engage, aside from posting, sharing, commenting, other ways that you can do that. I've already mentioned writing a personal note when connecting with someone. The homepage has your feed there, and you could make it a habit to look at it daily. It doesn't have to be for a long time. It could be 10 minutes a day where you find something, you read it, and you make a comment. You could post yourself about any updates that you might have, announcements. You can participate in those groups that I showed you. And one thing that I like doing a lot is I will look at the notifications page, because I will see there where our students and alumni have gotten jobs, and you can congratulate people. You might even make a note to contact somebody 6 months after they started working somewhere, if it's an interesting company, to find out how's it going, if it's what they expected. And then if you still want more ideas, I won't detail it here, but one of the methods that we recommend around putting structure to your search is the 2-hour job search. And this is basically networking your way to that first interview, which is so important. Now, I'm coming to the end of the presentation, and I have a recap in the form of a quiz with just 3 questions that I want to review with you. So, which section of the profile is most important to LinkedIn's algorithm? Is it A, the headline, B, the summary, or C, endorsements? Think about it. If you said headline, that's correct. But the question you might have is, how do you find the keywords to put, in the headline, or what might be important? So just wanted to give you a tip around that, which was around reviewing job postings, you can create a word cloud from the words you find there. You can compare your CV to postings in a platform called JobScan. And here's a link about top resume keywords to boost your profile. And you can also just look at other profiles, right? I mean, that's a wonderful way to learn about what the jargon is of a certain sector. Next question, which of these filters do recruiters use to make sure it's worth reaching out to you? Is it A, tenure on LinkedIn, B, tenure being your membership, how long you've been a member, B, being open to opportunities, or C, the groups that you belong to, group membership? Being open to opportunities. It's that feature that's really important for you to start highlighting. And then finally, last question, what's the biggest predictor of whether you'll get an interview? Is it having a profile photo? A, I'm sure you have one. B, is it having an all-star level profile? I'm sure you will get there. And then, or is it C, getting an employee referral? Getting a referral, getting a recommendation, somebody helping you open that door. So this concludes today's session on optimizing your profile. Before we go to the Q&A with Karen, Carlos is going to come in and talk to you about some key dates for the MIM program. Carlos?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Vicky, for that wonderful presentation. I was so engaged and I learned so much, even myself. So thank you for your time. So one of the things about this presentation is that you can take a lot from what Vicky had to share, and it does help when it comes to being visible to recruiters and to having an online profile. However, we only scratch the surface when it comes to using the tool. So some questions you could have is, okay, so I learned all these things, cool, so what are the next steps? How do I leverage LinkedIn for networking? What is a good message to send to people that I need to connect with? Because the mission is to get a referral. So how do I do that? When is the best time to do that? And so, for example, how can I increase my chances of receiving a response if I send a message or if I try to connect with somebody? I mean, you can have so many questions based on the usage of this tool. Specifically, how can I transform the conversation that I'm having into one about getting a job in the company, you know? So like I said, this is only the tip of the iceberg, and we go into further detail in the MIM program. So this is one of the many benefits of our MIM program, and Vicky is part of our Career Development Center, which is where I'm based as well, if you know me from past webinars. So I invite you to consider that if you're pursuing higher education, that the MIM at IESE could be an option. So on this slide, you have all the dates. We're still accepting applications until August 26th on a rolling admissions basis. Rolling admissions just means that we're gonna accept applications until all positions are filled. So if you're considering it, if you're still unsure about whether to get a job or find a job given the current circumstances in the economy, and you'd like to give the market some more time, then higher education would be worth it. And in higher education, we invite you to consider the MIM. So Karen, I think we can move ahead with questions for Vicky.
Okay, thank you, Carlos, and thank you, Vicky. Amazing webinar, very informative. Even I myself learned. You can hear me very well, right? Just to clarify. Okay, good. So I think we received some questions here. I'll start with this one. So how would I curate a LinkedIn profile with regards to being interested in, let's say, 2 or more job roles I'm interested in? So how do I tailor fit them into those different roles?
So that is a good question, because it's really challenging to do. You can't be all things to all people. Unlike the CV that I mentioned before, which you can tailor it, right? Because you're sending it to specific companies. With LinkedIn, you have to kind of keep a consistent story. So maybe you find, depending on what the job roles are, maybe there's something in common with them. Maybe one's data science and maybe one's finance. So you look at what is a transferable skill between the two, and you focus on those transferable skills, which would be problem solving or analytical skills. So look to see, what do those two roles have in common, and what are the competencies and skills that you can highlight that's coherent. Because what you can't be is schizophrenic. And the reality is, and I know from many stories with alumni, sometimes we are a little schizophrenic. We're like running over here into entrepreneurship. We're trying to get funding for a company, and then we're running over here applying for jobs, and we're saying these two totally different stories. So it's very human, it's very real. In LinkedIn, we have to show one face. So whatever you show, you have to show to both sides. It's complete transparency. So I don't, I don't, that's not exactly the answer I think you were looking for, but it's about giving you that perspective on
Okay.
what's important.
Okay, thank you for that helpful tip. In fact, the unity between the two roles or finding the common ground is quite interesting. And now, so sometimes in job postings, you see that there are the profiles of recruiters. So sometimes you have access to them. Is it worth actually contacting them directly? And if so, how should I go about it?
So this is a good question. And I'm kind of brainstorming myself here because, when I was managing the tech sector for the team, I've worked with many recruiters, and I know they don't have a lot of time. So if, there's maybe two ways to look at this. If you don't really fit the profile, if you're not, if you don't tick all of those boxes, and of course, not all of those boxes have to be ticked, it's less likely that they will be able to respond to you. It's just not humanly possible unless it's a type of organization that is smaller, that is not well known. I mean, the more well known a company is, the bigger the brand, the more applications you're going to receive, right? So that's one of the considerations. What is the size of the organization? The smaller it is, the more I would consider that personal approach and reaching out, because maybe they're not getting a lot of applications. So, I cannot answer in a sort of direct way, because you have to look at this on a case-by-case basis. If really your profile fits, because they're looking for the language skills you have. Let's say you're coming from Africa. You're coming, in fact, from the region of Africa that they're looking for. Absolutely reach out to the recruiter, right? So it really depends. And the way that you can do that, I think within the profile, I mean, you can try to send them a message. They sometimes have their emails within the summary or within the job posting itself. Okay, so a few other things to consider.
Okay, thank you for that, Vicky. So I'll put two questions together because they are section related, part of the sections that you discussed. One is about licenses and certifications. Should we put online courses in it? And can you give some examples if possible? And the other part on the sections is about the skills. So again, going back, there are some job postings. It shows the skills required. I feel like my skills are fulfill the job, but it doesn't quite reflect in LinkedIn as there's a tick box on the skills.
Okay, I'm not sure I followed the second one. Let me answer the first one with certifications. We'll go back to skills, but on this license and certification, absolutely, there's room for you to add. And I'm seeing it quite often when people are doing these MOOCs, these online courses from different programs. They're doing something in like a data science course, something analytical or whatever it is. It's great. It definitely enhances your profile, and you can even announce it as, I've seen people announcing it as a post, like I just graduated from this short course. So it's something that you can promote, let's say. When it comes to the skills, if it's a skill that is listed in the job profile, in the job posting, but you haven't yet had it, I mean, it's kind of telling you it's an important skill to have. I would only add it if you have it, and you still need people to endorse you. So, if you have a skill there, but there's no endorsements, is that valuable? I'm not somebody who has proactively asked for people to endorse me, but I'm going to start doing it. I'm going to start doing it because that's the advice that we're giving. And that's the advice that people in branding strategists are giving. So for very specific skills, do it now, and in a year or 2 or 3, it takes time for those endorsements to build up.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I maybe that person can write a separate question and I can answer it separately.
Yeah, please. Well, hopefully, I think it would be useful. Thank you, Vicky. And here, another one from Manuel. So Vicky, thank you for your presentation. For people who have been posting about past sectors, let's say automotive, and you want to veer off to another sector, someone who's looking for a job, should you do something about your past posts and show more general posts instead of a specific one?
So I don't think, I'm not aware at this point. It's something I'll have to look into. Can you edit your past post? I mean, I know you can edit within the post, but I'm not sure if you can actually just make it disappear altogether. That's something I would have to look into. But you know, anytime you're looking for a change, and it's really very common. All of us have done it. I did it, you know, transitioning from marketing to training, and you're creating a new story. So you want to build out new content. And this, if you don't have experience in that new sector that you're interested in, you can do that by sharing news, and posting it that way. Or maybe you're attending an event in the related field, and you can share it that way. But I would definitely look and see what other people are doing in that sector. What are their best practices? What are they talking about? What are the groups that they belong to? What are the yeah, I mean, I think it's an opportunity to kind of do research, and you can always sort of emulate, you know, what somebody else is doing, but learning by seeing what other people are doing is a great way when something is new to you.
Okay, I hope that was helpful for you, Manuel. Another one from Pascal. How would you handle multi-language profiles?
Sure.
English, Spanish, others,
Sure.
or just focus on one or update one?
Well, you know, sometimes this is a tricky thing, I think, because sometimes people have started in the language of their home country, and then they wanted to have a more global profile, so then they've added English. But I think you can change which one is your main profile. But I think what you have to do is also be consistent between the two profiles. So if it's really needed, and it is needed in many places to have the local language, absolutely keep both profiles. But I also have seen students that did not clean up their English profile. So like the summary was in French, or like I know an Italian student has the languages in Italian. So like it's not so obvious that German is Tedesco or something, you know, something like this. So it's not obvious. You have to just make sure that you keep consistent the language throughout. But I think it's something to be managed, and it could be a little bit tricky as you make changes.
Okay, thank you, Vicky. And perhaps to wrap up, you know, you've counseled a lot of people into this LinkedIn's strategy. Outside LinkedIn, like what are the preparations someone has to do before jumping into curating the LinkedIn profile?
Sure. This is a really good question. So right now, LinkedIn is public. So if you have a profile, you still want to optimize it, even if you haven't quite figured out that pre-work, and it's totally normal, like that you don't actually have a focus yet, right? But the other things that can be done are around the areas of self-assessment. You know, for when I'm advising our students, there's different assessments that I recommend that they do. It can be a personal SWOT that you do on yourself. So you're looking at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You can do exercises. You know, we provide students with all this material through different trainings and through digital content. But the ones that I focus on are around, you know, what are your key values? What are your strengths? Sort of, it's not only understanding what you're interested in, you know, but what really motivates you. Because we'd like to think that, you know, finding a career focus is as easy as looking, you know, behind a rock, but it doesn't happen that way. It usually happens through experimentation. It happens through doing and talking to other people. And it's sometimes easier for people to say what they don't want to do, you know, after they've earned some experience. So you have to start somewhere. So pick the areas of interest that you have. Some people have a geographical focus, some people have a sector focus, or some people have a function focus. You can start with what you studied if that isn't in line with your future as well. You can add, you know, information about that as you decide along the way what focus you want to have.
Okay, great. Thank you, Vicky. And any last notes from our key guests, Vicky and Carlos, before we end? This has
Well,
been very
I would just
helpful.
say, I would just encourage you, you know, take advantage of the platform, but look around. Look around. There's lots of other areas that I haven't talked about in terms of research. And you know, if you would like to connect with me, which you might, just let me know that you've seen the session, and then you can add also what's your, I guess, your biggest learning from the session today, or what's the first thing that you're going to do to optimize your profile. What are you going to edit first? Because that also is very informative for me. So thank you. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Vicky, and thank you for spending time with us today. Thank you, Carlos, as well, and to the rest of the MBA and MEM admissions team. I hope that the guests that have participated today have learned a lot. You will be receiving the recording from here. And don't forget to send Vicky a note on her homework for you. I think it would be useful to think about that. So thank you, everyone, and have a good day ahead.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, Karen.